Cool. Thanks a lot, Professor Wang, for leading the panel on Asia. That definitely, we're going to move on to the next one. Since the early of this year, staking and restaking have been the key topics of the year. And now let's welcome Blockdaemon.
Well, so it's just the two of us.
For once.
Maybe we do introductions and then we yap away. Yeah, I start. As the elder, I'll start. My name is Konstantin. I'm the CEO and founder of Blockdaemon. Maybe I'll do a quick introduction to Blockdaemon and then you can chime in too. So Blockdaemon, the word daemon in Blockdaemon implies an operating system that runs silently in the background. We've been successful in, I think, avoiding the limelight, which is one thing we're going to talk about when we talk about decentralization, which is we believe we run around 20 to 25% of all outsourced infrastructure in crypto at this point, where we run over 150,000 nodes across 70 different data centers. Even though we're not a pure infrastructure provider, we're a software company allowing institutions to connect to crypto network, and that involves universal APIs for transactions, and we have a product there, Ubiquity, that's the most used wallet API, for example. We have staking APIs. We're the largest independent staking provider, again, working with all the large exchanges and custodians. And then thirdly, we have an MPC self-custodial wallet stack that's fully integrated into our other APIs. We are a software company, so for example, on the wallet side, we license our software, and that's what then powers, for example, Grab's wallet or Circle's wallets and other wallet infrastructure. So really a pure sort of software play. We're around 200 people. We raised around $400 million. Customers and major holders of Blockdaemon stock are like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citibank, HashKey, Comcast. And so we've tried to kind of really own this sort of institutional space. And yeah, and you know, super excited to also talk to Oisín. He was an ex-Blockdaemon, so you know, it's always nice to chat.
Sweet. Thank you, Konstantin. Yeah, so nice to meet you, everybody. My name is Oisín. I'm CTO and co-founder at Obol Labs, and Obol are building distributed validator technology. A little bit about me and my background is I got into crypto in 2018 in Consensus, and then I joined Blockdaemon in 2020, where I did almost 2 years there working on ETH2, and I helped build out their ETH2 staking platform. While there, I realized that you could not run an Ethereum validator on more than one machine, and that was something that was strange to me, because in all of Web 2, you have important software running across multiple servers. Google doesn't go offline when you update its version, nor should a validator. So in 2021, I left Blockdaemon and started Obol with my co-founder Colin. And at this point, we are now a team of 30. We raised $19 million. And we're running on mainnet for about the last 3 months, building distributed validators, which we'll chat a bit more about as we get into this.
Yeah, awesome. And maybe I tell Oisín's story for a minute, how I see it unfold, and then we can talk about Obol. Because what's so fun is, like, when Oisín joined us, we were a pretty small outfit, and we were running a lot of ETH full nodes at the time, and we were really eager to, we knew we were going to run a lot of ETH staking nodes, and so we needed people like him to help us build a solution that allowed us to run a lot of infrastructure relatively efficiently, right? And so back then there was a lot of debates around clients, a way to also, we knew we would run a lot of ETH infrastructure. And so right now, I think, for example, we have over 2 million ETH run on nodes we operate. And so the way I see Oisín, he was one of those really super smart, I mean, I don't want to say kids because it sounds derogative, but it's one of those guys that you really want to hold in a company. But in my worldview, I figured you saw something fairly problematic, which is that companies like us, even then we were fairly small, have aggregate a lot of compute via institutional providers, right? Which means when you have something like Ethereum, it creates a problem where we run, I think, 100,000 ETH2 nodes. And so when we run node 100,001, the cost of operating that node is a lot lower than if you run node 101, right? Like when you buy a cloud infrastructure, there's enormous economies of scale. And so there's a real risk, ultimately, for these type of networks that companies like, that you create an oligarchy of these large companies who become larger and larger because we can offer cheaper fees than anyone else and still be profitable, right? And we can offer much better services over time. We have 24/7 customer support. We offer 5 nines uptime. We have insurance. We're make it impossible for individuals, for example, to run ETH nodes. And so the way I always kind of made sense of you leaving us, and I really didn't want him to leave. I offered him my firstborn child. He didn't want it. But it's like that. I feel Obol really wanted to solve a problem that's really systematic on a software layer when it comes to decentralization. That is a really, really important problem to solve. Interestingly enough, it's not the right problem for Blockdaemon to solve, right? So we have to be single-minded in saying we're going to commodify the institutional stack. We want everyone to use our infrastructure to stake. Now, obviously, that's not a super healthy instinct for ETH in general, right? And so, and the only answer that we were ever able to think of is the one, he kind of was wanting to work on. And so I thought that was always really, really interesting because it addresses something we inherently are concerned with, but it's against the commercial interests of Blockdaemon. So when you run a company, it's super interesting, right? So I'm kind of like, hey, I really want to do this. I think it's such a cool idea for crypto. And then it's also something, that we as Blockdaemon can't do. And so I thought that was really interesting. What I really, really like about Obol is that out of the many ways we can define decentralization, right? There's a lot of different degrees to it, and it's a vastly misunderstood subject. A project like Obol brings a software and systemic solution to a problem that can scale very substantially. And I really like that because ultimately I think the truth and power of crypto is all smart software over time, right? And so I'm really happy. I'm a seed investor, and I'm really happy once in a while I get to see you because it's a really, really powerful project. But yeah, anyway, but that's how I kind of see it. And I was like, when you see people who work in your company and they find a problem they get really passionate about, it's really, really fascinating because that's how I started Blockdaemon, And so I feel like I'm really proud of you, ultimately.
Thank you so much. That's super humbling. I'd actually like to do the same and maybe talk about how I see Blockdaemon from a similar angle. I first got into crypto full-time in 2018, and in late 2018, I first understood how much energy usage proof of work was costing. And I was like, uh-oh, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to scale. What's the plan? And in DevCon 4 at the end of 2018, Ethereum came out with their Serenity design, which was their first proposal to move to proof of stake. And at the time, it was 1,500 Ether minimum to stake, which is about $500,000. And to me, that was a prohibitive amount already. So I wrote this article called The Staking Problem, where I said, if you have a kind of a $500,000 million outlay that you could lose it all, you're going to outsource that to a professional. You are not going to take that risk on unless it's part of your core business model. And my fear at the time was that there was going to end up being 3 entities that had a huge amount of stake, and they were heavily regulated, insured, doing this for many years. But sooner or later, they would kind of start to censor or abuse this power softly. Nothing so blatant as to attack proof of stake, but just generally it would be kind of co-opted. And that was my kind of fear in 2018. And I had followed along with the Ethereum roadmap as it went along, including when it came down to 32 Ether. And at the start of COVID, I had been running a testnet on Prism when I was made redundant from Consensus, unfortunately. And I got picked up as a contractor for a company I hadn't heard of called Blockdaemon. And they, had me in doing research on ETH2, and I ended up building proof of stake infrastructure for them. And I, to be honest, didn't really expect what happened next, but we ended up being way more successful than I possibly could have imagined, and we're running a huge amount of the network. And I was like, oh, I didn't really think we'd get this far. And I was realizing that as part of this, this is, well, in around that time, through my work at Blockdaemon, I got invited to be on the shared sequencing, or sorry, not shared sequencing, shared secret validator panel with the Ethereum Foundation, and they introduced us to this technology that we now know as distributed validators. And I was pretty immediately convinced. I was like, oh, this is high availability for validators. This is definitely going to be a thing. But what's interesting about it, or what I was slow to realize, is I only saw it from the perspective of Blockdaemon, where it was I want to run my nodes on bare metal, and when one machine dies, I don't have to sit there looking at it, losing thousands of dollars an hour, being able to do nothing. I would like to be able to, fix that machine at my leisure and not go offline. What I didn't realize until a bit later is that you can actually have groups of entities running validators. And this is something that what I kind of see is what gave me a bit of faith in proof of stake. Up until then, I might have been, even though I worked in it full time, a little kind of concerned about it. But being able to have groups run validators is how you really reduce the trust a lot more in proof of stake systems. So if anything were to happen, if one entity was to go bankrupt in the morning or go rogue, your validators are still safe. There's a group involved. And that's kind of what keeps me so fascinated by distributed validators and working on it, is this idea that we can remove trust and people can still have their high uptime and high performance, but you can do it with a much more trust minimized manner. And to give one extra data point, I ran a validator of my own since Genesis, and I've run validators from Blockdaemon since Genesis. Mine have about 98% uptime, if even. The Blockdaemon ones are 3, maybe 4 nines of uptime, never go down. There's just, as you said, economies of scale of having an SRE team, having tooling, having monitoring that no individual can match. But if you do have a multi-sig and a group running validators, the goal is that we can kind of close that gap, and that people can run validators and get involved even if they are a much smaller operator or aren't as sophisticated as the big operators in the space. So yeah, I do think it's super important for Ethereum in the future to stay safe and secure and not be, I don't know, cannibalized or compromised in any manner.
Yeah, totally. And what I love about it too is and so because otherwise it's impossible to have long tail. I always, one of the arguments I had with the ETH Foundation was there was, before you guys were around, this sort of push for individuals to run validators. And it's just it's actually so risky. I mean, 32 ETH is not nothing. You need to, buy them or find people to give them to you. And then there's, the software. And as you said, you might have 80% of uptime. You miss blocks. You might get slashed. And the problem is, as an individual, you can't really do that, because you have to be up 24/7. And so I always felt that was a really misleading proposal in general. And what I love about your software is that it actually allows people to do it and not be worse than what we, for example, offer. And so it's really the only way for individuals to participate, which is obviously something we want in the long run, and so I think that's super important. What I find interesting, I'm actually just curious, so one of the things we're looking to do now in Blockdaemon, because we always have this sort of overlap a little bit, is what I find interesting, so I think you solved a really good problem with ETH, and obviously we're still really early, this is going to play out over a longer period of time. But are you guys, so for us, we moved heavily into this sort of sequencer, relayer, decentralization play. But our play, again, is different, right? You have espresso systems and stuff, projects that sort of maybe use a similar aspect how you were thinking when you thought about Obol. For us, it's we go to those institutions and say, hey, let us represent your trading volume, let's say. I mean, I'm riffing, I'm not saying this is the reality, but let's say one of our customers is JP Morgan, and we go to whatever, layer 0, and say, hey, we're going to put a sequencer up, and JP Morgan is going to pump their volume through it, give us a sequencer, And so we're doing that, right? So we're now decentralizing the sequencer stack, which suffers a very similar fate. And so I'm curious if you guys have thoughts there.
Yeah, 100%. So we at Obol are definitely investigating the distributed sequencer space and also the shared sequencer. And it comes from more or less the exact same concern, which is there are these big professional entities that'll be we'll run your sequencer for you. It's nice and easy. But the question is, how do you at least trust minimize them, or better yet, get, many more people in running nodes? And, it's more difficult at L2 because there's, even tighter margins because people are trying to make the cheapest L2 and offer the lowest costs. But things like Espresso, things like Astria, Arbitrum's new plan for having permissionless sequencing, these are all things we're researching, looking to kind of get involved with and help out. we very much try and think win-win in this space and figure out how do we like help one of these existing ones kind of decentralize and improve, because there's frankly quite a lot of L2s in the space. But yeah, what I actually talk to when I talk to the L2 teams is, have you spoken to any infrastructure providers and asked them questions? Because the first thing they'll always ask is, what's the story with the private keys? Is it like anything I've done before? Can I keep my private key infrastructure the same? Because if you're taking a risk with, millions or billions of dollars worth of stake, you need to be careful with them. So yeah, I would say that we are looking at decentralized sequencers and things like it, but nothing too fancy to show off publicly just yet, other than it is, something on our roadmap and being.
Yeah, super cool problem. I love it. Like I always say, like for us, that's like, we started the term nodes as a service, so I was like, oh, now it's like sequencers as a service. But like, it's an insanely, and I know we're over time, but it reminds me a little bit about the early days in ETH, there was a group of like 100 CEOs of wallet and exchanges, where we had a Skype chat group in like 2016, 2017, where we would agree the sync height of ETH every day. Like that's how bad that network was, like kind of, and so we came a really, really long way. But now the sequencer side is as bad, frankly. Like that, there's a lot of value being generated. It's not decentralized at all, and so it's super funny when you like see the stack and how it plays out. But it'll be a good one for you guys to get into. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I think we're done.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, man.